The last lecture in this series of quantitative research is on how to report quantitative findings. It's a tricky thing. In qualitative research, we report in terms of themes, whereas in quantitative, we have to report numbers. And if we don't report numbers properly, then we can't make anything out of the numbers. Suppose someone who has really no access to what is in your mind reads your report, would they be able to understand what you're trying to say and whether what you're trying to say is authentic, is really corresponding to what you found when you carried out the statistical test. So that is what we are going to talk about in this lecture, reporting quantitative data. The first thing that we need to remember when we have the results chapter is that your results chapter first reports your demographic details in a summary form. Basically, here you would use descriptive statistics. The second section in results is to report the reliability of the measures that you have used or instruments of measures that you have used. And the third section in your results will be corresponding to your objective 1 in your introductory chapter. So that there is a certain logic about this. You establish the preliminaries and then you actually go on to report the findings of your objectives, or if you had a hypothesis, then you would take a hypothesis by hypothesis and say what your data says. Does it support the hypothesis or it denies a hypothesis? And when you report every section under now the actual data results, then you might want to follow these 4 steps. First, say exactly what was the hypothesis that you were testing, or what was the research question that you were answering. Second, how did you answer this? What test did you carry out to answer this research question or to test the hypothesis? Third, what did you find? What was the outcome of your test? And fourthly, what is the implication of your result? Was the hypothesis tested or supported? Was the hypothesis rejected? Or do you think the data sufficiently answers your research question? So 4 steps. First, what was the question? Second, what did you do to answer that question? Third, what was the outcome? The result. If you used SPSS, what did SPSS say? And fourth, what is the implication? Was the hypothesis supported or rejected? Now, in this way, you take the reader along your argument so that already numbers could be confusing, and if you mix up your report, you might end up confusing the reader more. And finally, in the discussion chapter is when you will really discuss the implication of your results against what is already known in terms of literature review. So this is the overall tone of the results chapter. Now let us look at specific tests and see how you might report the results of a specific test. Of course, if you are reporting descriptive statistics, we can use tables and graphs, but don't overdo them. According to APA, if a table can be narrated in 1 sentence, let us say a table has only 2 rows and 1 column, then it is not worth putting it in a table. You can just include it in your main text. Similarly, don't overdo the graphs too much. If you can say 50% of your participants were male and 50% were female, you don't need a graph to show that. A sentence can capture that. So, in other words, when you use graphs and tables, you have to be discreet about the choice that you make. Don't overdo the use of tables and graphs. If you have a bulky data, it is not possible to describe it in text. Therefore, you need a table. So APA says, make a choice. Now, that is about descriptive statistics. Whatever is possible to be explained in the main text, explain it in the main text using numbers for sure, no problem. But whenever the data gets bulky in descriptive statistics, we use graphs and tables. Now, how to report inferential statistics? Let us start with t-test. In t-test, there are two ways you might want to report. One is using tables or just in the text. Tables in t-test are useful when you are reporting the mean scores, but do not copy and paste tables from SPSS because it has a lot of additional data that may not contribute to your argument, and it could confuse the reader. Besides, the tables in SPSS do not even appear to be good. In fact, even graphs, you can do the same graphs in Excel much better than in SPSS. SPSS is not a program for you to produce graphs and tables. The tables are there for you to see the data, not really to copy and paste that into your main text. So, I would say, if you're reporting a t-test, the mean scores could appear on a table, whereas the result of the t-test should be as part of your text, as you can see in your screen, that t within brackets df, that is the degree of freedom, is equal to the t value that will appear on your SPSS results column, comma, p, now that is a probability level or significance level, which is equal to the real data, or you can also summarize that p value as less than or greater than 0.05, so that you can argue whether it was statistically significant or not. So, in other words, what are we saying? Don't give too much data that is confusing to the reader, and give sufficient data to make your argument. Now, correlational analysis. Correlation analysis, let us say, we have said that correlation is always between two variables. But if you are examining two sets of variables, they can be more than two. You can do correlational analysis at the same time for many variables, not necessarily two, but the test itself will always correlate one variable against the other and produce a table. So you will have, in the vertical columns, you will have the same variable as in the horizontal rows. And it will show the number one, as you can see in the screen, as the variable relating to itself. When you relate one variable to itself, surely you will get 100% correlation, which means 1. So again, don't copy and paste the table from the SPSS results, because it is not easy to make out what it is. It gives you a lot of other data. So you might want to report, as you see in the screen, you have to clean up that table, and you have to show that variable A, when it is correlated with variable A, is 1, whereas when variable A is correlated to variable B, another variable, the level changes, the R value changes. And in the table that reports a correlation analysis, we indicate whether that correlation was significant or not by asterisks. If you give a single asterisk, then the significance level was below 0.05. If you give two asterisks, then significance level was below 0.01. If you give three asterisks, then the significance level was below 0.001. And all that is captured on the table. So then it becomes easy for the reader to understand how this correlation has worked. You might explain in the main text not all these numbers over and over again, but you would draw the attention of the reader to your main argument or main points, which can be also highlighted by using bold in the table. And that way, you give key text, key information in the main text and additional information on the table. Now, how to report a chi-square test? You would like to have a table because you have 2 rows and 2 columns, maybe 3 rows and 3 columns because the total will come as the 3rd column and 3rd row. Usually, as we said, chi-square is a comparison between 2 variables. You have both are nominal variables, like you remember the example of chocolates and gender. So you have male and female, like and dislike. You have a total of gender, total for like and dislike of chocolates. And that table is, I think, quite neat and important. Whereas the chi-square value may not appear in a table. It can appear in the main text. You say there was a difference in the frequency of the participants, male and female, scoring like and dislike, and this was significant. And chi-square value was this, p-value was this, in a neat sentence, as you can see on the screen. And this way, your report becomes readable, and this is what is recommended by APA. So in other words, use tables and graphs very discreetly. Use tables when there is enormous data, and do not repeat in your text whatever is in the table. Draw the attention of the reader to the main argument in the table, and tell the reader to look at the table number for more data. That way you keep the narrative going and you are not boring the reader with too many numbers and confusing the mind of the reader.